participatory and conversational, and therefore the kind of polycosmic navigation of getting into the narratives that lead us into the futures that we're aiming for fundamentally has to be participatory and conversational, which means it needs to be distributed. And so at a deep level, the infrastructure needs to support that. And it needs to resist centralization.
Don't you think that AI is intrinsically centralized right now between very few companies? And we're seeing some
There,
hope for decentralization, but I'm not sure yet if
uh,
it's
I guess I would say
relevant.
that there's not, yeah. I mean, okay, I guess just to drop for a moment into the kind of centralized versus
Uh-huh.
decentralized and how is distribution subtly different, and maybe even the concept of polycentricity
Yes.
is like, I don't really, in a strict and absolute sense, believe that there should be no centers. In fact, the having of centers is one of the basic shapes of the cosmos. Things have centers, things have peripheries, and so on, and that's normal and natural. Um, I think I wish there was a clearer way to articulate what something is like when it's, I guess in biology we say itis, like when a thing is inflamed or there's over much of a something, it's like, you know, we have a dermis, so skin is good, but dermatitis is this inflammation of the skin, and that's not good. So I think in the same way, there's like a kind of a centralizationitis or something
Mm.
that's like too much of something that needs to be in a proper measure.
Mm.
Um, so obviously a model exists kind of in a place, and I think more models, more independently trained models, models that are in conversation with other models. I think this is a different way of doing it than having like, one big centralized model accessed through a single API and owned by a single company or whatever. And at this point, yes, there are a few big ones and lots of smaller ones. So it's not to say that I think there is a landscape where we could see, and I haven't learned very much about DeepSeek yet, but I understand that it's working with some more open source stuff. It'd be interesting to learn more about exactly how much of that is open, and how much it increases the prospects for people to be able to build powerful models. Uh, yeah, more and more, a blooming, 10,000 flowers bloom of like many powerful models, I think is a better shape for us than having a few centralized models that are bottlenecked, and serving the interests of the for-profit companies that are advancing them. I think that's not not good. So I think when people are afraid of AI, it's interesting. I feel like they should be more concerned about the particular shape, the particular kind of topography of the distribution of AI.
Mm.
Where is it and how are we accessing it? And I think we should be very concerned about big centralized models run by for-profit companies. I don't think we need to be very worried about the propagation of many models run by many people and many communities. I think there's actually some pretty beautiful possibilities in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think AI is the ultimate new governance and network state?
I feel like I would have to bend my understanding around a little bit in order to be able to say that.
Mhm.
I don't really. I guess in simple terms, no.
Yeah,
Um,
it cannot
I
replace the governance
in fact,
systems.
I guess the truth is that when I think about I actually think that AI is a little bit of a misnomer.
What do you mean?
Uh, well, so if you think about the root of the word artificial,
Mm.
it has to do with, right, it comes from artifice. It's like artifact. It's like things that we are doing, things that we're creating. Fundamentally, the direction that this thing that we're actually talking about heads is into a place where, at least in terms of AGI, or anything, that was kind of like ramified out, where we have models creating models already. People are going and asking the models how to write prompts to talk to the models. So there's already these kind of feedback loops. And what happens there is that it becomes less and less the artifice. It becomes less and less something that we are doing, and more something phenomenological that is happening. And I feel like this term artificial at some point becomes kind of not as relevant, and maybe not as accurate. Okay, so yeah, maybe one term that could be proposed is hybrid, or conversational. I mean, here's a thing, and there's a great book by James Bridle called Ways of Being. I don't know if you've read this book. It's really excellent. He talks about quote unquote. Oh, I actually think he just calls it machine intelligence, but then also looks at animal intelligence and plant intelligence and so on and so forth. And essentially, by the end of the book, he's got you convinced that in fact the entire structure of the universe is intelligence, and that this is in essence nothing but intelligence. So that placing kind of modifiers in front of it becomes a sort of a needless to say, adding various modifiers. It's all just intelligence. So, but I think the pattern that's going to be most interesting in terms of governance is not turning things over to something else and abdicating agency, but rather having tools that help us to synthesize, help us to find both the kind of intersections and the outer sections, the things that are not matching in the sets and subsets of preferences and values and needs and boundaries and so on between us that might be harder to spot. So it's kind of like assisted, augmented, and maybe that's even a better one, because way back in the beginning of this, I don't know who's the guy who did like the mother of all demos. I forget this name. It's an important name.
Of demos, you mean? Okay. Demos of what?
No, it's the beginning. He's the guy who demonstrated the mouse and